Good afternoon. Thank you for spending your lunchtime with Asset Strategy Consultants. My name is India Suter. I'm the Director of Business Development at Asset Strategy. Today, we're going to hear a brief retirement plans, the passing of Erisa, the evolution of current DC plans, and the Secure Act. In addition, what happens after you have carefully saved that nest egg and it's time to collect? How do you take that lump sum and convert it into income? In some respects, accumulating that retirement balance is easier than managing the payout to yourself. What are guaranteed and non-guaranteed withdrawal options? Your presenters today are Stacy Heistand and Adam Meehan. Stacy is a senior consultant at Asset Strategy and has more than 20 years of experience advising on all aspects of retirement plans. His experience covers large multi-million-dollar plans as well as family wealth plans. Adam is a partner at Smith & Downey, law firm based in Towson. His business focuses on all aspects of employee benefit and executive compensation law. You may have listened to either one of these gentlemen before, as they are both regular and accomplished speakers. Your audio and video are turned off for the presentation. Before we get started, I want to direct your attention to the chat button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Should you have any questions during the presentations, please type it in and we'll have a Q&A at the end. Let's get started. Adam?
Perfect. Thank you, India. And just a quick little sound check to make sure, India, you can hear me okay? And Stacy gives me a thumbs up. Good. So thanks everybody for attending. Thanks to Asset Strategies for allowing me to present. I've been honored to be here with them and kind of to tell you the truth, to set the table a little bit and talk about some of the legal considerations and then act as an observer. I really am interested in what Stacy has to share. We've had obviously some preparation sessions and I find it to be very good on the different products that they're working on, the different arrangements and being able to bring to employers a marketable employee product. So again, I'm really happy to be here and hopefully we can impart some wisdom on in this kind of post-Secure Act environment. So I think one thing that we like to do when we're kind of teeing up this arrangement is think back to kind of the evolution of Erisa plans and take a quick second to observe some of the historical trends and kind of where we are and how we're currently interacting as a society approaching retirement. So in the early days, the pre-Erisa days, it was basically like the retirement plans were more like insurance. And for the most part, people didn't outlive their working years by very much. And it wasn't intended really to be kind of this overarching long spread type of quality of life in a post-working environment. For the most part, it was encouraged by tax favorability. Basically the employers would, if you worked for them long enough, they would give you a promise to cover you for the remainder of your years until potentially death. And in exchange, the Internal Revenue Code would give the employer certain tax breaks as it related to that retirement type of planning. And that's basically how it was run through the tax code and then other state contractual law requirements that governed all of these retirement plans. Basically, pre-funding was allowed, but not necessarily required. And for the most part, it operated like most non-qualified arrangements we have, which is that, the employers would keep the liabilities on their books, they would plan for it, and they would, of course, have the liability due under a contract basis, but there wasn't any necessarily this huge overarching Erisa scheme. So as the time developed, of course, Erisa came about, and basically what this is kind of the timeline was in this. It shows you usually in the 60s and 70s, we had a more functional Congress about the way they went about passing laws. But the big event that really spawned Erisa was this 1963, the Studebaker-Packard Corporation. And basically it was an event where the employer went under and all of these employees in South Bend, Indiana, all of a sudden didn't have any of their pension benefits that they were relying upon and that they had been promised for a really long time. I think it was 63, the event occurred. In 1971, there was a big Dateline special. And basically that opened everybody's eyes to say, hey, we need some kind of federal enforcement scheme and they turned to Erisa to kind of bring this all together. And what Erisa really did was kind of capture about 400 years of Anglo-Saxon trust law and basically bottle it all up and combine it with the tax components and the labor components and kind of wrap it all together into this Erisa statute in 1974, which basically created new rights and remedies, imposed certain funding requirements on plans, made sure that all the benefits were pre-funded and that they were subject to fiduciary responsibilities. So with that, basically at that time, as you all probably know, we mostly had defined benefit plans. Defined benefit plans, again, were what we were referencing in the earlier times, which is this idea that a employer would plan to satisfy a liability for the lifetime of a participant. It would guarantee them $100 a month for however long they lived, plus maybe a survivor benefit. And basically that's what Erisa really captured in 1974, was trying to control those arrangements. In the early 80s, the 401k plans started to take over. And as you can see on the second bullet or the sub bullets next to this slide, you really see this inverse relationship between the 401ks obviously increasing in popularity between 1979 and 2018, and then the DB plans decreasing greatly in terms of who actively participates. Nowadays, it's mostly certain particularized sectors, maybe oil, a lot of government contractors, still actively, or government employers, still actively with a defined benefit plan, but the 401k plan has taken over greatly. The shift in this is started to think about where the investment risk is at. Is it on the employee or the employer? Under the defined benefit model, of course, the employer had the obligation to plan for the liabilities and manage the investment risk, meaning that if the investments went bad, the employer would obviously be on the hook for more money. If the investments did well, the employer wouldn't be on the hook quite as much. But under the defined contribution model, the entire investment risk, of course, is on the employees. And under your typical 401k plan, the fiduciaries, of course, set a proper lineup with the help of smart folks like Stacy and other folks at Asset Strategies. But basically, the employee picks the investments, and if the investments go bad, it will be a less of a benefit at the end. Now, here we are in 2021, and about a year ago, of course, we had this huge scare. Stacy, either slide's fine. I'm going off on a small little tangent. My apologies. I know you're controlling the slides. But last year, of course, in March of 2020, we had a scare where people all of a sudden were worried about this lump sum defined contribution model that they were concerned would not be able to carry them all the way through retirement. If you had somebody who was 63 last year in March and saw all the economic turmoil and what could have happened to his or her balance, their lump sum balance under the 401k plan, there was great concern that that would not be sufficient to carry them through retirement. Now, of course, the global pandemic ended up resulting in market highs by the end of the year, so some of those concerns were alleviated. But I think we were all very concerned in March of 2020 of what that market might look like. So then if you think about the end of 2019 and from a legislative perspective and thinking about what was passed, the Secure Act was passed, and it contained a ton of retirement provisions. It was the biggest retirement legislation since the Pension Protection Act of 2006. And basically it tried to address and alleviate some of these concerns. Just as a bigger picture type of point of view, the Secure Act, it passed in late 2020. There were a few immediate type of provisions, including the change from age 70 and a half for an RMD age to age 72, and also some post-death beneficiary rules related to the RMDs. So any plan sponsors out there should be thinking about those things. It also introduced qualified birth or adoption rights, which other plan sponsors are thinking about. But a lot of these things were kind of pushed out because basically right as we all started planning on these things in February, March of last year, of course, COVID hit. And so a lot of these things were really pushed out, including the main point of conversation today from the Secure Act, which is, basically we're all coming back to this issue and thinking about how we could solve these problems. On your slide right now, there's three components that came out of the Secure Act. And the next two slides are going to focus on the first two. So let me just hit the third one. But the benefit statement lifetime income disclosures, that is a requirement that Congress put in the law for all DC plan sponsors to produce a statement which is going to tell 401k plan participants what their lump sum money will be able to buy in an open market as it relates to a lifetime income product. That statement was due 12 months from the issuance of guidance from the DOL, which was issued in September of last year. So by September 18th of 2021, the next quarterly statement must include this lifetime disclosure. And for everybody who's listening out there and for all employers, we really need to think about what that's going to do to people's expectations. And so the reason that one is so important, even though it's kind of disjointed from the other two, although it's in the same ballpark, is it's going to realize that some people who have, say, a $70,000 lump sum balance, who might have thought that would provide them more retirement income, are going to realize that they might be somewhat deficient in their retirement savings. And they're going to go to employers and say, hey, I need extra help, either by way of contributions or potentially looking for a lifetime income type of product that Stacy's going to tell you a little bit more about. But what I'm going to do is Stacy, if you want to switch to the next slide, just talk about the two provisions in the Secure Act that's going to make this a lot easier for employers to introduce these options. The first one is a fiduciary safe harbor for the selection of an insurance company or any kind of provider of a guaranteed retirement income product to be selected. Now, the big thing from lawyers like myself and watching this market develop over the past 15 years, where the PPA, right after the PPA, the Department of Labor tried to issue guidance, regulatory guidance that would make this a little bit easier, but it was mostly unsuccessful. The Secure Act really did a bold attempt to establish a safe harbor for fiduciaries who want to introduce these products. And with the main goal being that fiduciaries shouldn't have to be concerned that if in 15 years, the insurance company goes belly up and bankrupt, that somehow that would make their decision today imprudent and subject to potential vulnerability and lawsuit. So the safe harbor basically requires the fiduciaries to thoroughly search for and vet the potential providers, consider and conclude that the provider has the ability to pay the benefits, and conclude that the costs of the product are reasonable. And I had that little note in there that the statute, despite it typically being a best practice and a thought to be principle, the statute came right out and said, you have no requirement to select the lowest cost option. So that was, again, very helpful, very practical by Congress to put these things directly into the statute. And then there's going to be certain requirements on an annual basis with 7-year look back periods for disclosures to be made, and that will fulfill the fiduciary's ongoing duty to monitor the provider, so offering it within the plan. So that's very good, very useful for plan fiduciaries to be able to enter these things into the plan. And then the next step is one of the reasons that people didn't introduce these to the plan was that they were always concerned if they introduced them, that it would be impossible to get the product out. And so the other thing the Secure Act did was introduce this portability provision that says a plan can offer an in-kind distribution of one of these lifetime income products if the lifetime income product is no longer permitted under the plan. So the employer is allowed to take the product out of the plan, and the employees don't have to liquidate or pay any surrender charges. They can take the provision, take a distribution in kind, and roll it over to an IRA. So again, that solves a very, very painful problem for employers that wanted to introduce these things prior to the Secure Act. And it makes it much easier for employees and employers to offer these within the plan. So I'm going to turn it over to Stacy to give some commentary on and walk through kind of the options. But just from my perspective, Stacy, if you don't mind, I'll comment from time to time, because as I'm looking around, I'm watching employers go out into the marketplace, think about these things. And I'd love to kind of comment as you go through, Stacy, and hear what you have to say.
Well, great. Thanks, Adam. Excellent summary on the history of where we've come and some of the more recent legislation that's been passed. And so what I'm really kind of hoping to do here, and first, maybe I just say express a thank you on behalf of Asset Strategy for participating in today's call. I know everybody has busy schedules, and certainly appreciate your time taking some time to participate in this webinar. So what I'm hoping to do is just kind of build on some of the comments that Adam was addressing. And I'm not going to go as far back as Adam did to the Studebaker case or Erisa, But I will say, if we start to kind of look at the retirement landscape over the past 10 to 15 years, I do think as practitioners and plan sponsors, we've seen some pretty significant steps in in terms of getting folks ready for retirement readiness. And the comment I would make is that a lot of that emphasis, I think, has really been on the accumulation side. So you think about, for example, automatic enrollment was a concept that came out, 10 plus years ago. There was some hesitancy amongst plan sponsors about the idea of, hey, can I automatically put somebody in a plan and start a deferral for them? And with some law changes, that really kind of facilitated plan sponsors to take that action. And I think as we sit here in 2021 and we look back at retirement readiness statistics, we look at participation rates and things, I think we would say, wow, that's really been a huge contributor to the accumulation phase of retirement. We've really kind of moved the ball forward in terms of helping participants get ready for retirement. Where I don't think necessarily there's been a big jump is on what we call the decumulation phase or the retirement income phase. And so as somebody that does a lot of meetings with participants, both in group and one-on-one formats, where I see a big need is participants are nearing that sort of magical retirement date, and they're looking at their retirement account balance and saying, well, I've accumulated this big sum of money. Now what do I do with it? How do I make this transition? And I think, there's definitely some things in that Secure Act that Adam mentioned that really are kind of set up to help plan sponsors and retirement plans kind of help facilitate participants as they look to transition from accumulation to the retirement phase. And really, that's kind of where we think the next evolution of plans are going. So there's been a lot of emphasis on accumulation, and now we're starting to see more discussion around, okay, how do we help participants? Do we do that in plan with some sort of product that we put inside the 401k plan or 403b or defined contribution plan? Or are we okay with the idea that maybe they should be doing something outside of the plan? So again, just kind of backdrop here in terms of accumulation and some things that, we've seen over the past 10 or 15 years. Plan sponsors establishing goals and objectives to assist employees. I know at Asset Strategy, we typically refer to a 90-10-90 goal. So we like to see 90% participation. We like to see total contribution rates of at least 10%. And we like to see about 90% or more participants going in some sort of professionally managed investment option. Those are all great goals and can all be measured. But they're also all accumulation goals, right? So it doesn't really kind of address the decumulation side. Again, on the, in terms of the accumulation phase and some things that I think have really kind of moved the needle forward in terms of retirement readiness, really were largely attributable to plan design. So again, automatic enrollment. I think auto escalation has been another concept that's been very successful. So auto escalation, meaning that once the participant's in the plan, maybe their contribution rate is automatically being increased to a higher level on an annual basis. We've seen a lot of plan sponsors looking at match formula. And so the concept there being, how do we make sure that participants are saving enough? Maybe we're stretching the match out instead of basing the match on 6%. Maybe we're basing the match on 8%. Plan leakage has been another item that I think a lot of plan sponsors looking at different features in the plan. Do we offer loans? Do we offer more than one loan? Financial hardships? What is the impact to the plan in terms of these items that are, really kind of detracting from retirement readiness? And then ultimately kind of measuring this through income replacement goals. So a lot of this is kind of built around plan design and structure. And, I think, again, this has largely been positive, over the past 10 years or so. In terms of the investment menu and the accumulation phase, I like to say that I think most plan sponsors look at investments today on various tiers. And I would say tier one really kind of starts with the default option. And in our business, we refer to that as something called the qualified default investment alternative. And that's an option that is used for participants that don't proactively make an investment option. Quite commonly, the participants are going into what's called a target date retirement fund, and you'll see that abbreviated in the presentation as TDFs. So they've grown tremendously in popularity in retirement plans. And by some studies, about 60 cents on every dollar that goes into a defined contribution plan is now flowing into a target retirement date fund. So beyond that default fund, I would say tier 2 is really kind of looking at, comprising a well-diversified menu that offers maybe both passively managed index funds, but also maybe some actively managed funds as well. And would also give participants the option to kind of pick and choose amongst the target dates if they want something other than the one that's most that they would be defaulted into. And then I would say tier 3 is you start to get in sort of the specialty area or maybe into the lifetime income area. And that's where we're really kind of seeing a trend with plan sponsors. And I think part of that is a reflection of the Secure Act that was passed in 2019. I would certainly concur with Adam's comments that a lot of the things that were passed in the Secure Act sort of got put on hold last year with COVID. So there was really kind of a shift in focus to, sort of a batten down the hatches, making sure we have communication, making sure that we're addressing the CARES Act and some other things. But as the vaccine has come out and as we're starting to normalize somewhat, we are starting to see more conversation from plan sponsors around some of these ideas and some of the newer ideas around retirement income that we call lifetime income options. And then a couple other comments on the accumulation phase. I would say outcome-based education, very, very important. So, we see now more than ever plan sponsors offering targeted communication. One example of that is Social Security. I would make the argument as a certified financial planner representative that Social Security is very complex for the average person. There's lots of different options. You can retire at different dates and get different benefits. And so we see targeted communication around ideas like Social Security and planning for retirement. Plan sponsors are certainly establishing goals, monitoring achievements. There's more use of technology. And obviously looking at things like education versus advice and plans. So are we just giving general education, or should we be providing something that is specific investment advice to our participants? And of course, I think, when you set goals like this and you look at plan design, it's always a good practice to benchmark it, right? So how are we doing? Are we moving the needle forward in terms of retirement readiness? I would say still the number one sort of objective as you look at surveys is still fees, and I think that's, a result of all the litigation that's taking place. But once you get beyond fees and you start to look at some of the surveys, we're seeing a lot of plan sponsors look at the idea of advice, looking at the idea of managed accounts, but also starting to look at some of these retirement income products that are really meant to facilitate participants making the transition from the accumulation phase and into what we call the decumulation phase. So decumulation is kind of the buzzword in the industry right now. And really, decumulation is really just kind of the idea that we're transitioning somebody from accumulating assets to winding down the assets inside the defined contribution plan. And I think to Adam's point earlier, this is probably a timely topic, right? Because we all lived through the stock market sell-off of of February of 2020 and into March of 2020. And when I talk to participants, that's fresh in their mind. And I would argue that what's also fresh in their mind is still the great financial recession that took place in 08 and 09. And as participants that are nearing retirement, they're particularly concerned that an event like that might happen to them. And so it's really, it can be really impactful on the decisions they're making as they move into this decumulation phase. And again, as we think about this concept, it's really kind of difficult. It's a change in lifestyle. So it's really moving from, having a deduction from your paycheck to creating a paycheck for yourself, right? We're moving from accumulating assets to figuring out how do we wind this down. And there's a good quote here from Richard Thaler, who's a very popular professor out of the University of Chicago, and really, I would argue, an expert in the retirement plan world. You know, the comment he's making here is like, this is not easy. Like for the average person, that it's not easy for them to take this lump sum and really start to, you know, figure out how do they make the transition from all these assets they've accumulated into a retirement income stream. And so that's really kind of the purpose of this topic, is to kind of say, okay, how are our participants viewing this? And as plan sponsors, you know, what should we be doing about it? Because I think there's a recognition here that this is really a problem with our participants. And so this is a BlackRock survey that just kind of builds on that, is that, you know, there's really complexity of managing large sums of money over long periods of time. And, you know, participants, this is not their strength, right? They really need some sort of professional help. They need some assistance in kind of helping making this transition from a lump sum to, you know, to a monthly benefit. And really, in essence, what we're talking about here is, can we take a defined contribution plan and potentially put a benefit into the defined contribution plan that really sort of mirrors sort of the old days when, you know, defined benefit plans were providing monthly benefits. As we move forward here, some things and concepts to kind of think about. First and foremost, needs-based income. And so I think the concept that we would just try to drive home here is that as you look at income needs in retirement, it can really be broken down on sort of 2 tiers or 3 tiers. We have 2 tiers on here. The first tier being sort of, what do you need to meet your basic needs? So food, housing, transportation, healthcare, and things. And so when you look at investment strategy, you know, what we believe in, and I think most practitioners would believe in, is that you should have some sort of guaranteed benefit to meet those needs, right? You don't want to be in a situation where you can't meet your housing or food needs. And so the concept here is you're going to have a guaranteed benefit from Social Security. Some participants may have a guaranteed benefit from a defined benefit if they're fortunate enough to still have maybe a frozen defined benefit that's still around or something like that. But beyond the Social Security and defined benefit, if there's still a need to meet that, if there's still you need to meet the income need, you might look at doing something inside a defined contribution plan to sort of bridge that gap. So you might consider taking part of your defined contribution assets and putting it into some sort of guaranteed investment option that's going to help bridge the gap so that you're covering the needs-based income to meet food, housing, and whatnot. Above and beyond that, you sort of get into the wants, right? So that's where we're talking about maybe some more of the fun stuff, going out to eat, discretionary food, clothing, entertainment, traveling, you know, all those sort of goals that you maybe weren't able to accomplish before retirement that you want to accomplish in retirement and do some traveling. Yeah. And so from a retirement asset standpoint, you know, typically we're looking at, you're offering more of a sort of diversified portfolio there, one that will fluctuate up and down. And maybe if the portfolio is down for a given period of time, it's okay. It just means that you need to cut back on your discretionary spending. The third tier that's not on here that sometimes gets some attention and is important to some participants, but not all, is legacy. So sometimes, you know, in discussions with participants, they will say, hey, above and beyond my needs and wants, you know, I want to make sure something's left for my heirs, for my kids, so they have a good foundation. And that's, you know, that's kind of a different topic, but also kind of plays in the Secure Act, back to some of the comments that Adam made about required minimum distributions. So in terms of risk to participants, you know, what do we see as some of the risk? Well, certainly longevity risk is one of the big ones. So there's certainly the risk that you're going to outlive your retirement savings, particularly if you don't do a good job of managing it and setting up your spend down or drawdown strategy. And again, this really kind of comes back to the concept of, you know, can your participants in your plans, or can you as a participant kind of take this lump sum and convert it to an income stream that you can maintain throughout your lifetime? So longevity, insufficient savings in general is a risk. Bullet point number 3, I think, is a big one and an important one: over investing in capital preservation assets. Yeah, I've heard this really kind of throughout my career, from folks that are approaching retirement. And when I say approaching retirement, it's generally the folks that are, probably in their 50s or maybe in their early 60s. And there's sort of this perception that, okay, I'm almost there, like I've almost made it to retirement. What is the safe investment option? Like, I don't want my account to fluctuate. I want to go into something that's capital preservation. And in today's defined contribution plans, that really means that by and large, you're going into either maybe a money market or a stable value fund. And the problem with that is, probably many of you are aware, our interest rates are at really historical lows. So there's really very, very little return on those types of investments. And I would even argue that, in essence, they're probably getting a real return that's negative. So when you factor in inflation, which is another risk, combined with a low interest rate return, they're actually getting a negative real return in terms of the return on their dollars. And that's a hard concept for participants to grasp. They're so focused on preservation and volatility, they sort of lose sight sometimes from inflation and the loss of purchasing power. Just think of healthcare costs. So we all know what healthcare costs do on an annual basis. And so that's something that, participants really, really need to, to account for as they think about their strategies and spend down. And then some of the other risks that kind of come up are liquidity concerns with, unexpected emergencies, maybe selling a stock portfolio, for example, when the market's down. So take last year as an example. What future tax policy will look like. I think that's certainly a big one. That's always a variable that can be a risk to our participants. Just kind of looking at, again, talking about some studies and things in terms of retirees. So 8 and 10 pre-retirees, have a goal to manage a strategy that converts their assets to an income stream in retirement. And again, the concept here is that we really believe, and spending a lot of time with participants, what they really want at the end of the day is a paycheck. They want some certainty. And, Adam made the point of the statements and the change with the Secure Act coming out. And I don't know if Adam, if you want to throw any more points in about that, but I'll give you a chance if you want to.
Yeah, Stacy. Well, I think that's really, just looking at this slide, that's really what I wanted to kind of highlight, is that this other unrelated thing with this disclosure is going to really dictate some employee feedback probably by the end of this year and going into 2022. And I think the demands are going to come in one of two forms. It's either for an option like this within the retirement plan, so that there's more lifetime income products, or they're going to be demanding greater contributions through profit sharing or through match, because they need to get their balance up. So it'll be interesting kind of how that comes back. And I think what's going to probably happen among large employers first that can kind of entertain this and be a little bit more creative in design is that they're going to start using it as a marketing type of approach to attract and retain employees. So then, of course, the middle market will have to catch up thereafter. But it will be very interesting to see how the employees respond to these statements that will go out, and what they think of it, and what the feedback and impact will be on the industry.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think, I think the transition, a lot of the providers, and by providers, I mean record keepers, provide now, some of them, when you log on, you see a snapshot of kind of a projected income. The problem with that is we know typically usage is pretty low in terms of, going on and viewing accounts. But usage is pretty high when it comes to looking at participant statements. And I think, I think come the fall of this year, it'll be interesting to kind of see the reaction that we get from participants. But I'm anticipating, particularly the group that is a little bit close to retirement, really kind of taking a hard look at this, maybe walking into human resources and saying, wow, I really have a problem here. What are some solutions that you can help me out with, or what does our 401k plan offer that really kind of helps me and solve this income problem?
Yeah, and Stacy, one other point on that is that I think there was an option for the statement to project forward the way more record keepers programs really do, which is to try to project forward on a certain glide path. But I think these statements, based on the guidance in September, will basically suggest, hey, here's your lump sum balance now. Let's pretend you're 67 at the end of this year, and here are the certain factors. And so it's going to kind of not have the benefit of that projection. So people are going to see an even lower number than they might otherwise want to see, or might see through other projections that would be more typical on record keeper systems. So again, I think that's another reason there's going to be probably responses from a 47-year-old, for instance, who might take a look at it and say, you know what, I'm way behind. I thought I was much further along at this point. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, it was, this isn't in the presentation, but I'll just mention, looking at a recent study, a national study that came out, and it looked at retirement income solutions. And I think this is in part a reaction to the Secure Act, particularly with large plans. And the survey results showed that two-thirds of plan sponsors were planning to offer a drawdown solution or a calculator as part of the solution. And that's double what it was in 2019, and it's up from 11% in 2018. So we're really starting to see the large market and mid markets kind of take a look at these concepts, and again, that will eventually start to trickle down to some of the smaller plans. In terms of just some of the components to be thinking about here from a portfolio structure standpoint, I'm sure many of you have been through an investment presentation, risk versus reward. So more risk, we would expect obviously a higher rate of return, or require a higher rate of return over long term, but that comes with some volatility. Low risk, more predictable, but a lower return. And so again, these are ideas that we need to make sure that we're factoring in when we're designing a menu for participants, because again, to my earlier comments, I think a lot of participants are looking for, how do they minimize volatility? How do they minimize risk? But at the same time, make sure that their assets are growing, so that they don't outlive them. Another good little survey result here, along with kind of a cute cartoon. And this was 76% of responders would value their employer putting a retirement income solution into their plan. And this was based on a State Street study from back in 2018. And again, I think, as these new statements come out in the fall of 2021, I think, there'll be more questions from participants. And I think that will really kind of, for plan sponsors that aren't looking at these options, really kind of kickstart this a little bit more. But to Adam's earlier point, I think, some of the plan sponsors that are really kind of looking at it from a attraction and retention standpoint have really kind of jumped on this, because there's really the one thing that I continue to hear amongst our human resource teams that we work with is, we're looking for differentiators. We're looking for ways, how do we differentiate ourselves and our compensation structure versus other plan sponsors? And I think some of the more progressive companies are looking at these income solutions and saying, hey, this could be a differentiator for our participants, not only in terms of readiness and making the transition, but just from an overall benefit standpoint. And here's another just kind of quick quote from Bill Sharp, very, very well known, that this problem it's a hard problem to solve, and participants really kind of need some help in terms of, turning the corner, making the transition from accumulation to decumulation. So I want to take a few minutes here as we get into the different options that are available. And this is meant to just sort of be an introductory, some introductory comments on some of the different options that are on the marketplace and plan sponsors are looking at. And we would sort of categorize them as some options provide non-guaranteed income and some provide guaranteed income. And so on the non-guaranteed side, you may recognize some of these options, and they may already be in some of your plans. So very traditional stable value fund, capital preservation, pays a fixed or variable interest rate. Most stable value funds are probably somewhere in the range of 1.5% right now. Some might be better for bigger plans, and some might be a little bit lower. Concept is capital preservation, just giving a fixed rate of return. Managed accounts is something that's gotten a lot of attention in recent years. And so this is a concept where plan sponsors are looking at putting a managed account into the plan, which means that it's a service that's offered to give specific recommendations to a participant. So it's really kind of helping them set up their investment strategy, taking in consideration where they're at in the cycle in terms of accumulation, excuse me, or preparing to go into retirement. And so that's something that's really kind of got a lot of traction. The same survey that I referenced a couple minutes ago showed that about 45% of respondents were offering a managed account solution. Target date funds, we obviously know have been around. I would argue target date retirement funds are probably a little bit more geared for accumulation, and less of an attractive option for decumulation. And the reason I say that is, everybody's at different spots in terms of being prepared for retirement. Somebody may be prepared to replace 60% of income. Somebody may be prepared to replace 75% of income. And so the retirement date funds tend to be sort of a one size fits all. That's only age based, but you can certainly use that as an option in your plan. And certainly they're designed to provide a retirement income solution. Excuse me. And then on the other options would include managed fixed income bonds. So you would have like a bond fund or something like that inside the 401k or 403b, or even like a managed payout solution. And the managed payout solutions are a little bit newer, so they're typically like a mutual fund that's paying out a certain percentage on an annual basis. So, for example, if you have $100,000 in a managed payout mutual fund, they're intended to give you 4% payout, but it's not guaranteed. It's really just sort of a goal. And just some more information again on the target dates. And we just kind of put this up here because the idea is that they get a lot of attention. They're a big presence within the retirement plans, but that they are a non-guaranteed option. And so participants can use this option for the accumulation phase, but it's a little bit more of a challenge for them to sort of transition from the accumulation phase to a non-guaranteed option within the target dates that might be appropriate for their particular situation. In terms of some of the guaranteed options, product solutions that are out there, there's something called QLACs, or qualified longevity annuity contracts. And so really the way to kind of look at this type of option is that it's really something that you would purchase with retirement assets. So assets like in a 401k, at say age 65, that would pay you a future benefit. And so it would be actually triggered around, let's say like an age, trigger date like age 80 or 85. And the concept is really that it's going to pay you a monthly benefit once you hit those trigger ages. And so what it really is intended to do is kind of help solve the problem of longevity, so that if you're living a life expectancy along beyond sort of a normal life expectancy, this type of insurance type product is going to give you a benefit. And there's some kind of unique tax advantages with this too that kind of wrap into required minimum distributions. So I won't get into the details of that, but just kind of recognize that this is kind of one of the tools that's out there that plan sponsors and participants could potentially look at utilizing to kind of help solve the longevity issue. One of the tools that's gotten a lot of attention is guaranteed minimum withdrawal benefits, GMWBs. And here at Asset Strategy, it's something that we started studying actually about 10 plus years ago. We were engaged by a large plan sponsor in the South that really kind of recognized that their participants were having a problem making the transition from accumulation to retirement. And so they actually hired us to do a study and go out and look at what kind of decumulation products were out in the market. And I can tell you, like 10 years ago, there weren't a whole lot. Primarily the solution was to, participants would kind of retire and they'd take their money out of the retirement plan and go out and work with an advisor or buy some sort of retail product. But there were some insurance providers that started to roll out these guaranteed minimum withdrawal benefits. And we were particularly interested in them and how they worked. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about them today. But I think the difference today versus 10 years ago is the Secure Act really has provided, I think, plan sponsors some safeguards, some safe harbors around using these types of options. And I think plan sponsors are a little bit more willing to kind of dip their toe in looking at these types of products as opposed to, 8, 9, 10 years ago. Certainly other products that are out there would be like purchasing an annuity. So a participant could, purchase an annuity that would provide them a monthly benefit, much like a defined benefit plan would. And then obviously Social Security is going to make up a big portion of somebody's replacement income. And again, I would just emphasize here, again, my opinion would be is that Social Security is really an important education topic for participants. It's going to comprise a large percentage of the income that they need to replace. And again, it tends to be a little bit more of a complex topic in terms of when you take your benefit, some of the spousal benefits that come along with that. And so again, if you haven't done so, would strongly encourage you think about doing like a, Social Security seminar or make that available for your participants. So in terms of the guaranteed income products, again, the one I want to really just kind of focus on a little bit here with you today is the guaranteed minimum withdrawal benefit. And so this is an in-plan option that can be offered, like in a 401k or 403b. And the concept here is that participants can either put contributions in or make a lump sum deposit. This illustration here is really kind of showing a lump sum contribution. So it's really kind of saying, okay, at age, let's say around age 55, this participant is taking, let's say $100,000 and transferring it into a guaranteed minimum withdrawal benefit. And the concept is that by purchasing this, an insurance company is really kind of insuring against a downturn and promising the participant a guaranteed benefit. And in simple terms, the way that most of these benefits work is when you make a contribution or transfer money into it, you're establishing a benefit base. And so in this example, this participant would be establishing a benefit base of $100,000. And the insurance company would be on the hook for making sure that the participant receives an annual payout of 5%. So they put in a benefit of $100,000. They're paid out 5%, $5,000. And regardless of what the market does, they're at least going to get that minimum benefit, assuming they don't take any additional withdrawals. Now, one of the nice features about it is that, just because they're putting money in at 55 doesn't mean they're really kind of done accumulating assets or preparing for retirement. So this does have a step up feature in it, or what we also call as a high watermark. And so in this example, if we look at this participant and we think about the year 2020, so maybe on January 1st of 2020, they put 100,000 into this product. And if they were to revisit that benefit on January 1st of 2021, decent performance for last year was a diversified portfolio, performed upwards of, somewhere to 15 to 20%. So this account could easily be up to 120,000 based on 2020 performance. And so the concept with this type of product is that there's like a reset date or an anniversary date where you look at the market value, and that provides a new benefit base. So in using my example of January 1st, 2020 versus January 1st, 2021, this participant has moved from 100 to 120,000. So that 120,000 would now establish their new benefit base, and they would receive a 5% payment off that 120,000, for as long as they live. So this is a way for a participant to continue to have growth in their assets, but have some protection on the downside. And we think this has a lot of appeal because of its upside potential, its guaranteed benefit, and we'll get into some more details in a second. But it really also has some liquidity as well. So participants don't have to stay in it if they don't want to. They do have the option to get out of it, unlike some of the sort of more traditional annuity products. So this slide just kind of touches upon some of the key characteristics of the GMWB. Again, the investments generally are like a balanced, say 65-35 or 60-40 mix between stocks and bonds. It establishes a benefit base. So that initial contributions, is the starting point. And then if they have market gains over time, on an anniversary date, there could be a high watermark where that amount is locked in at a higher base. And I can tell you from my experience that every participant I've ever worked with that's in one of these benefits, they know they know the key date. So they know the date where the high watermark comes into effect. And I have one participant that calls me almost every year to kind of say, hey, just want to make sure that my account's being locked in at the new benefit. And I always reassure him. Yeah, it's kind of interesting that, the reaction that we've had in using these in some of our plan sponsors has been really, really positive by participants, again, looking for some downside protection. The benefit's not reduced by the normal distribution. So if you're taking a 5% payout, that's not reduced. Participants do have the option to take additional monies out, but that would potentially reduce then the annual benefit that they're getting. It reduces the benefit base. So that's an important consideration, but I think it also gives the participants some assurance that if they need to take some money out, they can do so. So just kind of wrapping things up here, I think, I think some of the key takeaways are that we're making this transition from more accumulation-based plan design to more decumulation or income. And so I think plan sponsors, as a result of looking to recruit new talent, retain existing talent, or just because of the Secure Act and some of the things that are going to be taking place, they're really going to be taking a look at these types of products that are out in the marketplace. And so I would encourage you to do so. I think it also helps with just the general transition of a workforce to retirement. And that's important, that you want sort of a nice transition, that people retire when they're supposed to retire or when you expect them to retire, and they're not kind of hanging on because maybe they're afraid to retire because they're not sure, that their benefits are going to last them through retirement. So just a couple wrap up points. Again, advantages here that we see, potentially reducing financial stress of employees because they know there's going to be some sort of fixed benefit there for them. Hopefully that helps enhance productivity and ultimately lower healthcare costs as there's a natural transition of folks retiring at normal retirement ages. They don't extend beyond their retirement date. And, I think some concepts, team productivity, morale, again, can be threatened when there's concerns about retirement or there's not a natural transition of the workforce. So that's a lot to cover today, but what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pause, and we would just invite you to throw any questions your way for us for the remaining portion of the hour. So if you have any questions for myself or for Adam, we would be happy to entertain them. And again, we would just like to say thanks again for participating in today's webinar.
Yes, Stacy.
I'll give you a couple seconds.
Go ahead, India.
Sorry, go ahead, Adam. I'll give you a couple seconds to type in a question. We did have one question about Erisa and whether church plans fall under Erisa. I think generally they don't, but I told the person who asked the question that one of you would expand on that.
Yeah, and yeah, I can. And I just started to type it. I wasn't sure how close we were going to come to the hour, so I wanted to make sure John got a response. The Secure Act itself does apply to church plans. It basically, the Secure Act has numerous provisions amending all kinds of parts of the United States Code, the laws on the books. And the ones that apply just to the tax code apply equally to church plans, things like age 72, RMDs, certain 403B plan inclusions and custodial accounts that apply. And then long-term part-time employees and the requirement that they be allowed to participate if they're otherwise excluded for working less than 1,000 hours. There's a rule under the Secure Act that says they have to be eligible to participate in the 403B or 401k for elective deferral purposes if they work 3 straight years of 500 hours, and that requires starting counting hours in 2021. So the earliest the 3x5 crowd would be eligible to participate would be 2024. So all of those things do apply to church plans. As it relates to this specific discussion, the safe harbor for annuity products amends the Erisa statute, which wouldn't be applicable to church plans. Those fiduciary duties are not the same. However, I think there's probably a very strong indirect impact, meaning that most of my church plan clients operate a lot of their plans in similar manners from a governance perspective and in a what I'll call a fiduciary perspective, not the Erisa fiduciary rules, but some type of state fiduciary type of laws. They operate in a very similar manner. And so as the Erisa market matures and develops and starts to introduce these products, I would imagine a lot of the church plan clients will drift off of some of those efforts and contention of, and bringing down the price of that market to be more manageable in retirement plans. So I assume that ultimately it will have a kind of an indirect impact on the church plans, although the statute itself, the amendments it made will not directly impact the rules that govern church plans. I hope that helped with that question, John. And Stacy, I had a quick question. I'm not sure. So I've seen, the one other kind of thing that I'm seeing as people are working this out is that, I think the true gist of the statute itself was kind of to try to make this kind of in-plan option. Through my conversations, I'm seeing some employers kind of get to that point and they're trying to kind of look at what kind of options they can offer in plan. But they're not, like they're somewhat hesitant. I see some of them kind of just taking some of this Secure Act safe harbor guidance and really just setting it up as a distribution option in the plan, which is something that I think they, under some plans they could have always done. But basically using this guidance to kind of create a new distribution right. I think that might have been one of your options on around slide 22. But are you seeing that as well? Like, I mean, between the in plan and kind of just the distribution right, are you seeing employers go one way or the other? Or?
Yeah, so traditionally a lot of the plans that we've worked with, offered a lump sum option only, or, they could purchase an annuity. And certainly one of the trends that we've seen is the, as part of an amendment process to the plan, the option to add what we call an ad hoc withdrawal, in which really kind of gives the participant flexibility to do withdrawals as needed, or even installment options. And installment options are kind of a traditional distribution option that have been part of plans for many years, but really never gotten a lot of usage, in my opinion. Generally participants would take the lump sum and move it out of the plan and put it into an IRA and draw out of the IRA as they need it.
Yep.
But I think to your point, Adam, we are seeing a trend where plan sponsors are looking at the distribution options. And in part, if they're considering these options, they have to look at the plan design options to make sure that they coincide with, like a GMWB and things, right? So if they only have a lump sum, they're going to need to amend their plan. And the timing of this is kind of good because most of our plan sponsors are in the midst of the recycle process, the restatement process right now anyways. And so it's kind of a timely topic if you're a plan sponsor and you're looking at your plan document, you should be looking at the distribution provisions. And I think to your point, I would argue that they're more liberal. They're moving in a more liberal direction in terms of making it more flexible for participants to make it a little bit easier for them to take withdrawals from these plans.
Thanks for that. I appreciate that.
I have a question that's come in about the portability of the guaranteed minimum withdrawal plans or benefit.
Yeah, so that's really been sort of it's been an issue in the past that there's been a big stumbling block, and essentially, as I understand it, there's been sort of a new exchange set up, so that if you're moving from one record keeper to another record keeper, potentially you would be able to keep that benefit, and that was kind of really a big hang up in the past, is that if you were with a record keeper that offered one of these, let's say GMWBs, guaranteed minimal withdrawal benefits, and you move to another record keeper, could you keep it? And it was really kind of problematic. And I think, there's really sort of been an evolution here with the design of these products, which ties into the portability issue. But we don't see that as a big, the problem has kind of been decreased, I guess I would say, today, as opposed to when these products started coming out about 10 years ago. And I think Adam made this point too, that there is some flexibility with some of them going into an IRA too. So if a participant wanted to move it into an IRA, potentially that's an option as well.
Right. Okay, well, it looks like that's all the questions for today. Again, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate your time. And if you have any questions that come up later, please feel free to follow up with any of us, and we're happy to take that question. Have a great day.
Thank you, India. Thank you, Stacy.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.